Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri made it a McLaren 1-2 in qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix, while Lewis Hamilton took 8th on what is his Ferrari debut. Plenty of intriguing questions, no doubt, then heading into this Formula One season, which starts, well, this weekend, but the actual first race will begin tomorrow morning, early doors, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're going to look ahead to it in just a moment. But there does feel, Cass, as though this season there's a lot more excitement heading into it, partly maybe because of Hamilton moving to a new team.
Yeah,
and
Ferrari,
you're thinking, well, why has he moved to Ferrari? He's got to be thinking this is a team that might win him that record 8th championship that he's so desperate for. All these kind of little extra tales as well. A lot of rookies involved.
Well, Lando
this year
Norris
as well.
had an amazing season last year, didn't he? And he's now Verstappen's the one to beat.
Yeah.
I don't know about Lewis Hamilton because he's been such a successful winner and obviously things change quite quickly in racing. If you have a car and it doesn't quite perform as well as another car, then now it feels like he's trying to find that way back to success again. We're going with Ferrari, but Ferrari's cars have not been competitive in recent years compared to others.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think, they finished up runners-up, didn't they, in the constructors?
Yeah, but he's
But I know
a
what you're
winner.
saying.
He's a winner.
Yeah.
He wants to be winning because how many has he won? 7?
Well, yeah, he's
seven.
he wants
So
an 8th.
one more. So that's still a big gap to make that from getting that extra one.
Yeah, but it's quite fascinating to see the icon of Lewis Hamilton driving for the icon that is Ferrari.
It's amazing. Well, it's the red car. It's just eye-catching. It's the fan base that they have, Ferrari.
That's what I mean. There's lots of intriguing stories with regards to all of this. Like I say, quite a few rookies. I think there are 6 rookies. When I say rookies, some of them have driven a few times, a few races, for example, like Liam Lawson, who's been promoted from reserve to drive alongside Max Verstappen at Red Bull, for example. But there's loads of intriguing stories. Let's bring you more on this one then, ahead of the first race of the season that starts tomorrow. Delighted to say joining us is the Forbes F1 contributor, Kanzah Maktoum. Kanzah, how are you this morning? How are you doing?
Kanzah?
I'm good, thank you. How are you guys?
Yeah,
good.
We're really, really well. I know qualifying has finished, so would you mind just running us through everything that happened?
Yeah, sure. It's been a really exciting qualifying. We had what we kind of expected McLaren to be the top 2. We had Verstappen kind of come in between. Verstappen's known to kind of, maximize what he has with the car, whereas his teammate Liam Lawson, it's his first race with Red Bull, struggled quite a bit in practice as well as qualifying and ended up being knocked out in Q1. Russell came through as well. I think Tsunoda was the standout performance. He was very under the radar throughout the whole qualifying, but ended up qualifying P5. Williams seemed to do really well. They seem to be fighting for the top of the midfield, let's say. I think it's between Williams and Alpine. And the rest of the field kind of went in that order. You had Aston Martin in the midfield. You had the Mercedes as well. I think one of the things that was quite surprising was Antonelli. What happened with Antonelli was that he unfortunately had an issue with the floor when he got off the curb, and that kind of put him out of contention to be in Q3. So he ended up being out qualified and being knocked out in early stages of the qualifying rounds.
I was going to ask, the Hamilton moving to Ferrari is obviously exciting for him, but what chances really does he have of edging, maybe not this season, but the season after, to another title?
It's definitely not, impossible at all. He's a 7-time world champion. He has the pedigree to be a champion once again. I think what's really interesting is the excitement that's been surrounding this move, especially since early last year. He's been very vocal about it, but here he is in this new team, this new culture, with a new car and a new engine. So he has a lot to kind of get on top of. So I wouldn't expect him to be a world champion this year. maybe we'd see him win some races. That Ferrari does look quite quick. It does have good straight line speed. But I think, it's not far out of reach to say that he will be in contention in the coming years. He does have a longer contract. And he, like I said, he's a 7-time world champion. He's a proven world champion. So he is very well within that right to be a world champion again.
Obviously, his teammate is Charles Leclerc. Leclerc will look at himself as a number one in this Ferrari team as well. That's what Hamilton will consider himself. Do you think you can have two number ones in a team?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's difficult to have two number ones in a team. I think if we look historically, whether we look at Schumacher era, Michael Schumacher was the number one in that team. We saw with Sebastian Vettel, he was, whether the team, agrees or denies, he was a number one in that team. And we saw last year with McLaren being unable to choose a number one, how, Norris's championship kind of slipped away. Like, he would have been more in contention. That gap would have been closer with Verstappen. I really believe that if McLaren had chosen a number one driver earlier. So whether it is difficult to choose, yes, but I think at some point every team has to make that decision which driver to back for the World Drivers' Championship.
It's going to be really fascinating to see how it all pans out. And if you look at the last 3 years, I suppose last year Kanzah was the closest it has been for some time when it came to the Drivers' Championship. I think Verstappen got off to a great start, but I think by the end there were 7 different drivers sort of celebrating victories as well. It was a really exciting season. Maybe people that had fallen out of love with it fell back in love with it because of the fact it felt more competitive.
Yeah, completely. And you can expect more of that this season as well. It's not just like the front of the field that's closer, but also the back of the field have caught up. The midfield itself are much, much closer. So we can see a lot more fights, for points. I think it's such a big difference from, say, like 2023, when Red Bull were pretty much winning every race but one race. So I think we can see kind of a repeat of last year or even better.
Well, it's going to be exciting. Do you think you're going to get used to seeing Hamilton in the red of Ferrari? It's going to take time.
It is quite odd to see him in red, but he does look very good in red. He looks very happy. So I think we'll get used to it quite quickly.
Yes, certainly. Kanzah, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That is the first F1 Grand Prix getting underway tomorrow then, with Lando Norris on pole. And as we were saying, his McLaren teammate makes it a 1-2 on the front row. Oscar Piastri finishing second.
talkSPORT Drive with Andy Goldstein. Monday to Friday afternoon from 4 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.